Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Today, I want to talk about what's going on in Texas. I want to talk about one of the three pro-gun bills that are potentially going to be signed by the governor very soon there, and how it could be very dangerous for some of its residents, and how it could cause some residents become felons without really doing anything they thought was wrong, something their state told them they could do. Now, if you're not familiar, there's three things going through their legislation right now, or their legislature right now. One of them is the permitless carry bill, which is awesome. No downside to that. That's kudos to Texas for that and to every other state that's passed them. Great thing. Glad the governor's going to sign it. The second is a sanctuary state bill, stating that, the state of Texas will be a sanctuary state where they won't enforce federal gun laws, any new federal gun laws. Those bills are just useless. I mean, even if they said, we've got no gun laws, and you start doing whatever you want with guns, the feds can still step in and prosecute you and make you a felon, put you in prison, because federal law supersedes state law in pretty much every case. That's been determined many, many times in the courts. So if you did something the feds didn't like, they could still step in, make you a felon. That's mostly just bluster and, pandering, showing off for your pro-gun supporters without really doing anything. The permitless carry bill, that's actually doing something. The sanctuary state, that's more symbolic than anything else. But it's the third bill I want to talk about today. Now, the third bill is stating that the state of Texas is going to make suppressors a lot easier to get. You're not going to have a tax stamp for them. If they are made in the state of Texas and stamped made in the state of Texas, well, if you live in Texas, you don't have to get a federal stamp for it because the federal government uses interstate commerce as an excuse to put all these regulations on firearms. And since these aren't going across state lines, well, then the federal government has no right to regulate it. Well, there's some problems with this law and some good things potentially, but let's talk about the problems first. Well, the problem is the federal law doesn't just say if it crosses state lines, it's illegal or you need a tax stamp. It just says if you have them or you place them on a firearm, etc., or you manufacture them, you need a tax stamp. Doesn't say anything about interstate commerce. That's just a basis they use for why they have the authority to pass that law. So if you're in the state of Texas and you decide to start manufacturing suppressors, people buy them, use them without tax stamps, you're both felons. All of you are felons, period. That's just the way it is. If the federal government steps in and charges you, you're going to be charged with a felony and they're going to win because federal law strictly prohibits what you just did. And like we said before, federal law supersedes state law. So all these people engaging in this stuff who their government told them it's perfectly fine to do could find themselves now without the right to even keep or bear a firearm, much less put a suppressor on one. And that's dangerous. I think it's dangerous when you start telling your citizens, you can do this, even though there is that federal law still exists that if they want to step in and take you out, they'll step in and take you out. It's happened many times throughout history. You don't have to look far to find it. Lots of states have passed laws saying, sometimes gun laws, saying we don't like this that the federal government says and we're going to change it in our state. And then the federal government goes, you can write all the state laws you want, but our federal law still takes precedent. There's that 1968 Gun Rights Act there. So they step in, turn people who were following their state law into felons. I don't like that. But that's unfortunately a risk of laws like this. Now, I'm hoping that the federal government will just say, we don't want this fight. Suppressors are not something to fight over because if we do make a big deal out of this, most people are going to look at the law and go, well, that law's stupid anyway. Why wouldn't we want people using suppressors? Especially at ranges, etc. I don't even call them suppressors. I call them politeners. They make the gun much quieter, so you're more polite to the people around you while you're shooting it. So they don't want that fight. Now, there might be someone out there, there's all kinds of opportunists out there who love to pick fights with the ATF and the government just so they can get attention and make money and, sell products and maybe get views on YouTube. So they pick these fights, causing the government to be backed into a corner where they're like, well, now we got to fucking enforce the law. So we got to go in and make an example of someone. So that would probably happen in the gun community because the gun community is very much about that. They love to do that. And that's a risk. But I'm hoping the federal government would just be like, we don't want this fight. I'm hoping most people in the state of Texas would be like, we're doing our thing and we're going to keep doing it. And one of the things I want to make a comparison between this new suppressor law with is the pot laws here in Washington. Marijuana is still illegal federally. Every business out there right now selling it, if the feds decided they wanted to enforce the law, could step in and arrest every one of them. And there wouldn't be a legal defense of them. Everyone who invests in the pot industry out here was told right off the bat, hey, if the feds decide to do this, you've got no legal defense. The state law changing will not protect you from federal statutes. So you'll go to prison and you'll become a felon. That was one of the reasons I didn't invest in it. I wish I had because that's booming, but I didn't invest in it because I didn't want to risk being a felon because I valued my rights too much. But it hasn't been enforced. Now, Jeff Sessions was going to enforce it. That's why a lot of people were panicking when Trump first got elected and nominated Jeff Sessions as his attorney general because he said, I'm going to enforce the pot laws. Luckily, Trump got rid of him before he could ever do that. So here, I can walk down, well, I couldn't walk, too far to walk, but I could walk it, but it'd take a long time. I can drive down the bottom of the hill here, buy a pack of marijuana cigarettes, the Mary Jane or doobies, as the youngsters call them these days, I do believe. I could buy a pack of marijuana cigarettes just like I can buy regular cigarettes. Doesn't make a bit of difference here. They're not even, in fact, cigarettes are more dangerous. They're more regulated here than marijuana is, I think. So I can go down and buy pot brownies, pot cookies, pot gummies, whatever I want. I don't want any of it because I don't like how I feel when I use THC. It makes me feel goofy. I don't like feeling goofy. So it's just common here now. And it's catching, it's spreading, it's going to lots of other states. It's really becoming common now that states are passing recreational marijuana laws. And the federal government hasn't really stepped in because it's a fight they really don't want, because it's like it doesn't make any sense to enforce this law. We let people drink grain alcohol. It's far more dangerous than marijuana. So why are we prohibiting marijuana? So they don't want to get on the public stage and fight that fight because they'd be overturned in the courts. And that never looks good for a government when their laws are overturned in the courts. They would rather, correct their errors themselves so they don't look like morons, which they usually end up just looking like morons anyway. But that's one way this law could go. People in Texas can start making suppressors, using suppressors, not having a problem with them. And the federal government can go, I don't want to get involved in this. And then it can start spreading to the point where the government goes, well, suppressors are being used in most every state now. There's not a problem with it. We just got to change this stupid law before someone challenges it in court and gets it overturned. So I'm hoping that's the way it goes. I hope it becomes a very positive thing and that suppressors become more common, because it is a ridiculous thing that suppressors are regulated. Just like it's a ridiculous thing that your gun has to be a certain length if you put a stock on it, or else somehow it's dangerous. Things like that. All this NFA stuff is garbage. Garbage. Period. It needs to go away. And if we can't get rid of it all at once by getting rid of the NFA, because the NFA is just way too big a moneymaker for the federal government, and the ATF employs so many people, etc., so getting rid of it's probably not going to happen. But if we could slowly get it state by state where suppressors are just common things now, just like marijuana is common in so many states now, that can be some real progress. We could be making some real change. And eventually, it would probably actually be good if someone inside of a state like Texas got charged by the federal government for owning suppressors, because now they're damaged and they have standing and it can go through the courts. So having this law there that says you can do it is great, because that gives you a not a legal defense, but it gives you kind of a standing, a soapbox to stand on when you do appeal your conviction or you do appeal the charges on a state level and then on a federal level, because it makes people pay attention and you've actually been damaged, so you can actually go the distance with the lawsuit. I don't want to get into the legal stuff about it here, but it's risky. It's very risky. These laws are always risky. And if you pass them, I hope they explain to residents, listen, if you do this, the feds can still prosecute you. So how about we just do it and don't make a big deal out of it? And if you do make a big deal out of it, be prepared to fight your way all the way to Supreme Court. because that'll be the way it's justified if you're actually setting it up for a Supreme Court fight. If you're just trying to make money and get attention, which is going to put other people in jail and jeopardize other people's rights, well, then just shut your mouth, because nobody needs the crybabies and the attention whores and the profiteers. But like I said, this law comes with risks, or this bill, if it's signed into law, comes with a lot of risks, and I think people should be very aware of them. But it has a lot of potential, like I said, at starting to chip away at those stupid laws about things like suppressors, SBRs, SBSs, etc. So I'm hoping this will be a big step towards positive change, but only time will tell. All right, everybody, with that being said, I want to move on to my favorite part of the show, gun talk. And today during gun talk, I want to do a little how-to thing here, but I also want to address a comment from a viewer. It seems this viewer felt the need to congratulate me on becoming a far more mature person over the last few years, because they put a comment there saying that they were so glad to see that I'm not slapping that juvenile Punisher logo on everything like I used to do with grips and everything else. How I used to put the Punisher logo on stuff, and it was so juvenile and it made me look so bad, and they're so glad that I've moved past that. Well, in response to that question, I thought best thing I could do is go out and buy a couple of these. And what this is just a little backplate for my SIG P320 that actually has a little 3D Punisher skull on it there. And I'm going to put this on my P320 AXG. First, I need to get the slide off of this here. All right, right here is the rear plate I'm going to be replacing. So let's go ahead and get that out of there. All you got to do to get it out is depress that little pin right there, that little button you see. Push that in, slide this out. And then I just got to push everything back down in there. And slide the new one up in. And there we have it. Punisher backplate installed. So for people out there who think they can tell me what I should and shouldn't do with my guns, you can go yourself with a damn rusty and figure out that you ain't my mom. All right, everybody, I want to end the show today with the pet rescue of the day. And today we have Mia. As you can see, Mia is a pretty little Pomeranian. My son loves Pomeranians. That's one of his favorite dogs, which is odd because we have big dogs. We have pit bulls and English bulldogs and Catahoulas, but he loves Pomeranians. And Mia is an adorable little Pomeranian here in her little pink sundress. And she was rescued by John P. Now, Mia's circumstances were some that I wanted to put forward here, let people be more cognizant of. Often, when someone dies and leaves a pet behind, people don't pay attention to the pet whatsoever. It gets tossed around or ignored completely. No one wants it. And people pay so much attention to the loved ones that are grieving over the loss of a family member, and they forget that that puppy's grieving too. They loved that person who died also. They were a bigger part of their life than they probably were yours. But people don't have any consideration for the puppy. And that was Mia's circumstances. She was owned by an elderly person who passed away, and the family just didn't want the dog, didn't do anything for the dog, just surrendered it. So now you've got a heartbroken puppy missing their owner, the biggest part of their life, and also in circumstances that you wouldn't wish on any dog. And that's just always terrible. So if you're someone looking to adopt, be open to these dogs. They're often older dogs, sometimes even elderly dogs themselves. Be open to these dogs. Adopt them. Hell, if you're commitment phobic, it's not even a big commitment because they're going to live a couple more years. That's it. And you will have to go through the pain of putting them down. A lot of people don't like that. But just remember, that's part of it with every pet. And in this case, you've got an animal, like I said, that is devastated. And you get to bring a little bit more happiness into their life for their last few years so that they don't live their last years not only mourning, but miserable, put upon, unloved. Bring a little bit more light into an older dog who needs adoption's life, especially one who's lost its owner. So I wanted to say congratulations to John P. for being someone who stepped up and did that. And I want to say congratulations to Mia, condolences for losing your best friend, but also congratulations on finding a second lease on life with a new forever home. All right, everybody, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come back again tomorrow. Until then, I just want to sign off as usual by saying, as far as the state of the world today is concerned, it is what it is. But what it will be in the future if we continue to ignore the profiteers, the fearmongers, the propagandists, the sensationalists, the people who just want to make money and manipulate you and do what's best for them, not what's best for our rights. If we continue to ignore those people, what things will be in the future for those of us that value our freedoms is better.